remember the first time I realized something inside me wasn't right. It wasn't dramatic, no loud voices in my head, no sudden snap. It was quiet, almost peaceful. I was sitting by the window of my small apartment, watching people on the street, below people, laughing, carrying groceries, walking dogs. And for some reason, I couldn't feel anything. No curiosity, no warmth, nothing. It was like watching a movie with the sound turned off. That emptiness, that was the first sign. Back then, I had a decent job. I wasn't rich, but I wasn't struggling either. I worked at a repair shop, fixing things people didn't care about enough to replace. Old radios, fans, sometimes even clocks. It was quiet work, and I liked that. Or maybe I just didn't have the energy for anything else. My boss, Frank, used to say I was too calm for my own good. Maybe he was right. I never raised my voice, never argued, never even smiled much. People liked me because I was predictable. They had no idea what was growing inside me. The shift began slowly, small moments that built up over time. Like the day I saw a stray dog get hit by a car right outside the shop. It didn't die instantly. It kept trying to move, dragging its broken legs across the pavement. People screamed. Someone ran to help, and I just stood there watching, not out of cruelty. I just watched. I remember thinking about how fragile everything was, how quickly life turns into a mess of motion and blood. And then I went back inside and fixed a radio, as if nothing happened. After that, I started noticing things about people, how fake they were, how every smile seemed rehearsed, how every "how are you" was just noise. I started avoiding small talk. At first, people thought I was shy. Then they thought I was rude. I didn't care either way. But deep down, something was changing. Something darker was taking shape. I started keeping notes, not diaries notes, about people, their habits, the way they talked, what made them nervous. My coworkers, my neighbors, even the guy at the grocery store. I would write down their words, their gestures, what they looked like when they thought no one was watching. I didn't know why I was doing it, but I couldn't stop. Maybe I wanted to understand them, or maybe I just wanted to confirm that they were all pretending. Then, one night, something happened that pushed me further. I was coming home late, walking down an empty street. I heard a man yelling somewhere ahead, drunk, maybe. When I turned the corner, I saw him pushing a woman against a wall. She was crying, begging him to stop. I froze. Any normal person would have stepped in, called for help, but I didn't. I watched. Again, I watched how her voice trembled, how his hands shook, how fear filled the air like smoke. I wanted to see how far it would go, not to enjoy it, but to understand it, to see the truth people hide when no one's looking. Eventually, someone shouted from a nearby window, and the man ran off. The woman fell to the ground, sobbing. I didn't move to help. I just walked past her. When I got home, I stared at myself in the mirror for a long time. I wanted to feel disgusted or guilty, but I didn't. There was only silence. The days that followed were different. I started testing myself, seeing how far that numbness would go. I would go out of my way to do things that should have made me feel sad, happy, angry, something. I went to funerals of strangers. I watched people laugh in parks. I even tried to fall in love once, but it was like chasing smoke. Everything looked real, but when I reached for it, it disappeared. One morning, I found a bird that had flown into my window. Its neck was broken, but it was still breathing. I picked it up and held it in my hands. I felt its heart beating fast, terrified, and I squeezed. Slowly, I watched as it struggled, then went still. I thought I'd feel something horror, maybe satisfaction, but there was nothing, just quiet again. And that quiet felt familiar, almost comforting. That was the moment I realized I wasn't trying to feel anymore. I was observing. I had become the audience of life, not a part of it. And once that realization set in, everything started to unravel. People started avoiding me. They said there was something off about me, that my eyes looked different. I didn't argue. They were right. My reflection didn't look like me anymore. My eyes looked empty, like I was watching the world through glass. Then came the nightmares, or maybe they were memories. I dream of things I hadn't done but could have. Violent things. Sometimes I'd wake up and see blood on my hands, only to realize it was a dream. Or maybe not. I wasn't sure anymore. The line between real and imagined was blurring. I'd wake up at 3 a.m. and find myself sitting by the window, staring at the street below, not knowing how long I'd been there. One night, Frank called me to his office. He said customers were complaining that I was too intense, that I made them uncomfortable. He asked if something was wrong. I looked him dead in the eye and said, "Do you ever wonder what it feels like to stop pretending?" He didn't understand. He just looked confused. Then he told me to take a few days off. I didn't go back after that. I started staying indoors, closing the curtains, cutting ties with everyone. My phone would ring, and I'd let it buzz until it stopped. I stopped paying bills. I stopped eating properly. But I didn't feel weak. In fact, I felt sharper, more aware. I could hear the world breathing outside, sirens, laughter, footsteps, and every sound felt like a reminder that I didn't belong out there anymore. Then, something new began happening. I started hearing a voice, not from outside, but from within the silence. It wasn't loud, it wasn't commanding. It was calm, almost gentle. It would ask simple questions. Why do you care? Do you think they'd help you if the roles were reversed? And I'd answer it sometimes. I'd tell it, no, they wouldn't. And it would say, then why do you pretend? That voice became my only company, my only friend. It didn't judge me. It didn't ask for anything. It just listened and agreed. And together, we began to build a new kind of truth. A truth that said feelings are a weakness. That morality is a lie we tell ourselves to survive. That deep down, everyone hides the same darkness. I was just the one brave enough to face it. I started walking the streets again, but differently this time. I wasn't invisible anymore. I watched people closely, the way they smiled, too wide, or avoided eye contact. I could sense fear, guilt, lies. It was all written on their faces. I wasn't imagining it. I knew things about them without them speaking. And sometimes I followed them, just to see, just to know. Once, I followed a man all the way to his home. He didn't notice me. I stood across the street, watching through his window as he kissed his wife, played with his kid, laughed like the world was perfect. And all I could think was how easy it would be to break that illusion, to show him how fragile his peace really was. But I didn't do it. Not that night. I just walked home, whispering to the voice, soon. That's when I started realizing something important. I wasn't broken. I was free. Free from fear, from guilt, from the lies people feed themselves. I didn't need their world anymore. And once that thought settled in, I started planning. Not for destruction, but for understanding. I wanted to see what happens when the mask comes off, when people face what they really are. And that was the beginning. The first time it happened, it wasn't planned. It never is. People think monsters wake up one day and decide to become something else, something dark. But it's slower than that. It's quieter. It sneaks in through the cracks of routine until one day you realize the person you used to be is gone. That night, I understood what the voice inside me had been preparing me for. It was a Thursday, the kind of night when the world feels half asleep. I'd been walking for hours, no destination in mind, just wandering through streets that smelled like rain and gasoline. I remember passing by a diner, the lights flickering, the sign buzzing faintly in the cold air. Through the window, I saw a man yelling at a waitress. She couldn't have been more than 20, but he was older, drunk, his face red and swollen with anger. I could see the fear in her eyes as she tried to keep her voice steady. No one else in the diner moved. They just watched, pretending not to see, just like I used to. And then something in me snapped. Not in rage, not in emotion at all. It was like watching a switch flip. I walked in. The bell above the door chimed, and everyone turned to look at me. The drunk man stopped mid-sentence, frowning. I didn't say anything. I just stood there, staring at him. The whole room went silent. The waitress looked at me, desperate, but I didn't look back at her. I looked only at him. He tried to puff himself up, said something about minding my own business, but his voice trembled. I could see his hands shake around his beer bottle. I took a step forward, then another. I could hear my heartbeat, slow and steady. I could see his eyes darting toward the exit, calculating. I didn't raise my voice. I just said, "Apologize to her." He laughed nervously, but it wasn't real. He muttered something under his breath. I repeated it, slower this time, quieter. "Apologize." The way his face changed from anger to fear was almost beautiful. He mumbled an apology, then stumbled out of the diner, pretending he wasn't scared. But I saw it. I felt it. For the first time in years, I felt something. Not joy, not hate, control. I walked out too, not saying another word. That night, I couldn't sleep. The voice inside me was louder now, asking me questions I couldn't ignore. Did you see how they all looked at you? Yes, they respected you, feared you. I didn't do anything, but you could have. I sat in the dark, the words echoing in my head. It wasn't about violence. It was about power, about peeling back the surface of people's comfort and showing them what's underneath fear, shame, helplessness. That's when I knew I didn't need to hurt anyone. I just needed to make them see. In the days that followed, I started watching people again, but differently. Not from curiosity, but from purpose. I began testing them small experiments at first, leaving notes on their cars, following them for a block, rearranging small things they'd never notice at first. A door left open, a picture frame tilted, an object missing, then returned. The panic that grew in their eyes when they realized something wasn't right. That's what fascinated me. Not because I enjoyed it, but because it was real. It stripped away the mask. I started keeping records, not just notes, but full profiles. Photos, addresses, habits. My apartment began to look like an evidence room, not of crimes, but of truth. Each person became a study in fear. Each file, a reminder of how fragile the mind really is. But the voice wanted more. "They'll forget," it whispered. "You have to make them remember." I didn't argue. Maybe it was right. One evening, I chose someone at random. A man I'd seen jogging every morning past my building. Clean cut, headphones in, the kind of person who never looks around. I followed him for a week. I learned his patterns: when he left, where he stopped for coffee, how he always took the same path home. On the 7th day, I decided to interrupt the pattern. It was early morning, the sky still gray. He turned down the alley shortcut he always took. I stepped out from the shadows just as he passed. He froze. I didn't say anything at first, just looked at him like I did with the man in the diner. Then I asked quietly, "Do you know how many times I've watched you?" He blinked, confused. "What?" I took a step closer. 7 days, same route, same cup of coffee, same everything. "You never noticed, did you?" He stammered, started to back away, but I followed. "You think you're safe because it's morning, because there are people nearby. You think the world is kind because it's daylight, but it's not." His breathing got faster. "What do you want, man?" "Nothing," I said. "I just wanted you to know someone sees you, really sees you." Then I walked away, just like that. No violence, chaos. But when I turned the corner, I could hear him running, panicked, gasping, alive in a way he probably hadn't been in years. I smiled for the first time in months. The voice whispered, "Now he knows." Hey, that was the start of it. The small experiments became habits. The habits became rituals. I began moving through the city like a shadow, not to harm, but to awaken. People forgot how to feel. I reminded them. I made them question their safety, their certainty, their comfort. Each reaction was a mirror reflecting the truth I already knew. Everyone hides something, and when that mask starts to crack, that's when you see who they really are. But the more I played with fear, the more I began to see its reflection in myself. I wasn't immune. The dreams came back darker this time. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, convinced there was someone standing in the corner of my room, watching me the way I watched others. Sometimes I'd hear footsteps when I was alone. Sometimes I'd find things moved around, notes written in my own handwriting that I didn't remember writing. The voice said, "You're losing control." Maybe it was right, but maybe control was the lie all along. One night, I went out again, not to watch, not to test, just to walk. The streets were empty, the air heavy with mist. I felt like a ghost moving through a forgotten world. That's when I saw her, a woman sitting on a bench under a streetlight, crying softly into her hands. I don't know why I stopped. Maybe curiosity, maybe recognition. I sat down at the other end of the bench. She didn't notice me at first. When she did, she wiped her eyes quickly, embarrassed. "Are you okay?" I asked. My voice sounded almost human. She nodded, even though she clearly wasn't. "Just a bad night." I watched her for a moment. "Someone hurt you?" She hesitated. "No, just life." Her answer lingered in the air like fog. For a moment, I felt something stir inside me. Not empathy, not quite. Just an echo of who I used to be. I wanted to say something comforting, but the words felt foreign on my tongue. So I just said, "You'll be fine." She managed a small smile. "You sound sure." "I am." I lied. As I stood up to leave, she said softly, "Thank you." I didn't turn around, but for some reason, that word, "thank you," stayed with me. It rattled inside my head all night, louder than the voice. Maybe it was a sign that something human was still left inside me. Or maybe it was the beginning of the next descent. Because when dawn came, I found myself wondering, if fear awakens people, what would it take to awaken me? The voice didn't answer this time, and that silence scared me. It's strange how silence can become a sound of its own. It hums in your ears after the city goes to sleep, wraps itself around you like a living thing. That silence had been my companion for months now, constant and loyal. But lately, it started to change. It wasn't peaceful anymore. It was heavy, dense, full of whispers I couldn't separate from my own thoughts. I stopped keeping track of time. Days bled into nights. Nights dissolved into something else entirely. My apartment looked like a crime scene of my own mind papers. Photos, scribbles covering the walls, all connected by red threads I didn't remember pinning. Each face meant something once, but now they blurred together, a collage of confusion. I had written phrases in black marker across the plaster. "They sleep. You watch." And below it, "Who watches you?" I don't remember writing that second one. The voice inside me had grown quieter. Not gone, just waiting. I could feel it watching me from the edges of my thoughts. Patient, curious. Sometimes it would whisper my name when I was half asleep. Sometimes I'd hear it laugh softly when I tried to ignore it. I used to talk back, but not anymore. Talking made it real. Silence kept a contained door, so I told myself. Then the dreams began again. Only this time, I wasn't sure they were dreams. I'd wake up in places I didn't recognize: abandoned buildings, alleys, rooftops overlooking the city. Once, I woke up by the river, shoes soaked, hands covered in mud. I didn't know how I got there. Another time, I found a torn piece of paper in my pocket with a stranger's name written on it. A name I didn't remember hearing before. I tried to convince myself it was stress, that maybe I was sleepwalking. But deep down, I knew it was something else. The line between me and the voice was fading. It wasn't whispering anymore, it was thinking with me one night. The air felt different, thick, electric. I couldn't stay inside. I threw on my coat and started walking with no idea where I was going. The streets were empty except for the occasional car gliding past like a ghost. I wandered for hours until I found myself near the edge of town, where the streetlights ended and the forest began. That's when I saw a flicker of movement in the trees. Someone was out there. At first, I thought it was another hallucination, but then I heard it, breathing fast, human. I stepped closer. A teenage boy, maybe 16, hiding behind a tree, clutching a backpack to his chest. He looked at me like a trapped animal. "Please," he said. I didn't do anything. I frowned. "What are you talking about?" He shook his head. "You were following me." I hadn't been. At least, I didn't think I had. But something about the way he said it froze me in place. How did he know my face? My heart started pounding, first from confusion, then from something else. Excitement, maybe. He backed away. "I'm calling the cops." I took a step forward. "No, you're not." It wasn't a threat. It was a statement, a truth. He reached for his phone, but my hand moved faster than I thought possible. I grabbed his wrist. He tried to pull away, but I held on. His skin was warm, trembling. His fear hit me like a wave roll. Real, alive. The voice inside me whispered, "Now you see what they feel." And for a moment, I did. I saw everything: his terror, his confusion, the realization that the world wasn't safe. I felt powerful again. Too powerful. Then something snapped. His knee hit my side, and I shoved him back, harder than I meant to. His head hit the base of a tree with a sickening thud. The sound hung in the air, sharp and final. He didn't move. For a long time, I just stood there, staring at him. My breath came in short, cold bursts. The world seemed frozen. The wind, the trees, even the stars above. I wanted to feel guilt. I wanted to feel horror. But all I felt was quiet. The same quiet that had been with me from the beginning. I knelt beside him, touching his neck. No pulse. His eyes were open, reflecting the faint glow of the streetlight. They looked empty, like mine. I whispered, "I didn't mean to." The voice answered instantly, "Yes, you did." I froze. "No, it was an accident. If you wanted to see how far you'd go. Now you know." I stumbled backward, shaking my head. No. But the voice was laughing, note, cruelly, just softly, as if amused by my denial. "You freed him," it said. "You showed him the truth." I didn't remember running, but suddenly I was miles away, sitting under a bridge. My hands trembling, my heart still calm. The world felt unreal, like I'd stepped outside of it completely. Every sound, every shadow, every distant siren was muted, hollow. I looked at my hands again, expecting them to shake. They didn't. They were steady. Too steady. When the sun rose, I went back home and locked the door. I washed my hands for an hour, scrubbing until my skin burned, but no amount of water could clean what I felt underneath. That night, I sat in front of the mirror again, staring at my reflection. I waited for guilt, for shame, for fear, but nothing came. The voice whispered, "You've crossed it now." Crossed what? The line between watching and becoming. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. My throat wouldn't move. I watched my own face in the mirror twist into something I didn't recognize. The corners of my mouth curved upward, not because I wanted to smile, but because something inside me did. From that night on, everything changed. I started hearing footsteps again, but this time, they weren't mine. I'd wake up and find the front door unlocked, the curtains open. Once, I found muddy footprints on the floor, leading from the door to the mirror. They weren't mine. The voice said, "He's still with you." I tried to forget the boy, to tell myself it was an accident. But then I started seeing him, in reflections, in crowds, in dreams, always standing just far enough away that I couldn't reach him, watching me like I used to watch others. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was something else. But part of me started believing he was real, that he hadn't died, that he'd followed me home. One night, I heard knocking on my door, soft, rhythmic, 3 times. I didn't move. The knocking stopped. Then, from inside the apartment, the same sound echoed from the wall behind me. 3 knocks. Slow, deliberate. The voice whispered, "He's found you." I turned, but there was nothing. There's the wall covered in photos and notes. But one of the papers had changed. The name on it, the boy's name, was now written in red ink. Fresh. I stared at it for what felt like hours. My hands were shaking now, but not from fear, from recognition. Somewhere deep down, I knew I hadn't written that. The voice didn't speak again that night. For the first time, it was silent, and that silence was worse than anything it had ever said. It started with the clocks. Every one of them began ticking at a different rhythm. The one in the kitchen ran fast, the one in the bedroom ran slow, and the one on my desk stopped entirely. I'd sit in front of them for hours, watching their hands twitch unevenly, as if time itself was breaking apart piece by piece. That's how I knew something had changed. It wasn't just inside my head anymore. The world around me was tilting, quietly, patiently. Days no longer felt like days. I'd wake up at odd hours, sometimes morning, times the middle of the night, but the light always looked the same, pale, colorless, artificial. I stopped going outside. I didn't trust what waited beyond the door. Every creak of the floorboards, every shadow in the corner felt like it was watching me. I covered the mirrors with blankets. I couldn't look at myself anymore. Every time I did, I saw movement that wasn't mine, a blink that came a second too late, a mouth twitching before I spoke. The reflection wasn't copying me, it was anticipating me. The voice hadn't spoken in days, and that silence was worse than the noise. I used to hate hearing it, but now I missed it. Without it, my thoughts had no edges, no shape. They just circled endlessly, whispering things I didn't understand. Sometimes I'd catch myself answering questions no one asked. Sometimes I'd hear my own voice from another room. I started writing again, not to make sense of things, but to keep them from slipping away. The words didn't look like mine anymore. They were too neat, too deliberate. Sometimes I'd fall asleep at the desk and wake up to find whole pages written in my handwriting, scribing things I didn't remember doing, things I wasn't sure had even happened. One page simply said, over and over, "He's in the walls." That phrase followed me everywhere. I'd hear faint tapping behind the plaster, soft, patient, like someone tracing the inside of the walls with their fingers. I told myself it was the pipes, the old wood, settling, anything but what my mind suggested. But deep down, I knew the truth. Whether or not he was real didn't matter anymore. The fear was, once I gathered the courage to step outside again, the sunlight hit me like a stranger's hand, too bright, too sharp. Everything felt exaggerated, colors louder, sounds stretched thin. People looked wrong. Their faces didn't match their voices. Their movements lagged, like I was seeing them through a broken screen. I tried to speak to a woman at a bus stop, just to see if she was real. But when she turned, her eyes blurred for a second, like static. I blinked, and she was gone. The street was empty. That's when I realized I wasn't walking in the city anymore. Not the city I knew. Buildings looked familiar, but not the same. Signs had letters missing, street names slightly altered. I stood in the middle of the road and felt the world breathe differently. It wasn't my world anymore. Or maybe it never had been. The voice returned that night. Faint at first, like static from an old radio. "You see it now, don't you?" it said. I didn't answer. "The watchers," it continued softly. "They were never out there. They're in here." I looked around my apartment. The photographs on the wall, the ones I'd taken, The faces I'd studied seemed to move when I wasn't looking directly at them. Their eyes followed me. I tore them down one by one, but the outlines they left behind on the wall looked like silhouettes, like someone still standing there. "Stop it," I whispered. "You can't stop where you started," the voice replied. "You looked too long." They looked back. I covered my ears, but that didn't help. The voice wasn't coming from outside anymore. It was echoing inside my thoughts, like a ripple in water that never faded. Days passed, I think. I stopped eating properly. My reflection under the blankets began to move again, even though I wasn't near it. I'd hear it breathing at night, steady and rhythmic, as if something else lived behind the fabric. Then came the photographs again, slipped under my door at random hours. Not from anyone I knew. They showed me sleeping. Different angles, different nights. The first one scared me. The 10th one didn't. I stopped checking the door after that. I tried recording myself while I slept, hoping to find an answer. The next morning, when I played the recording, all I heard was whispering, too many voices speaking at once, my own among them. One phrase repeated again and again. "He's still here." I didn't remember saying it. I began to wonder if maybe I was the one haunting the apartment, not the other way around. Maybe I'd died that night in the woods and hadn't realized it. Maybe the world had kept moving without me, and what I was living in now was just an echo, a loop that never ended. But then the knocking returned. 3 slow, deliberate knocks on the wall. I froze, heart pounding, but this time it wasn't behind me. It was inside the room. I turned toward the sound, and the blanket over the mirror was trembling slightly, as if something behind it was breathing. The air grew cold, the kind of cold that settles deep in your chest and makes you forget how to move. "Don't look," the voice whispered, but I couldn't help it. I reached out, hand shaking, and pulled the blanket down. The mirror was cracked, but not shattered, and behind the fractures, my reflection was smiling, not cruelly, not madly, just calmly, patiently, as if it had been waiting for me to notice. And then it spoke, not aloud, but inside my mind, in the same tone as the voice I've been hearing for months. "You're not being watched," it said. "You're the one watching yourself." For the first time, I understood. The fear, the whispers, the footsteps, they weren't coming from anyone else. They were fragments of me, scattered across the places I had broken. The boy, the shadows, the watchers, they were all reflections of the same truth I'd been running from. I wasn't haunted. I was divided. The voice didn't speak again after that. It didn't need to. I sat there in front of the mirror, looking into my own eyes. And for the first time in a long time, there was silence, real silence, the kind that isn't empty, but complete. I don't know how long I stayed there, maybe hours, maybe days. But when I finally stood, I felt something shift, not peace, not redemption, just acceptance. Maybe the line between sanity and madness isn't a wall. Maybe it's a mirror, and sometimes the only way to see yourself clearly is to watch yourself break. The days no longer arrive in order. They come in fragments. A morning that feels like yesterday, an evening that feels like years ago. I've stopped marking the calendar. The pages all look the same now. Sometimes I wake up and find that my apartment has rearranged itself. The chair near the window faces a different direction. The light flickers from another angle. And for a moment, I think maybe I've woken up somewhere else entirely. I try to tell myself it's just my mind playing tricks. But part of me knows the truth. Maybe it isn't the room that's moving. Maybe it's me. Maybe every time I close my eyes, I shift a little further from where I began. The mirror is still uncovered. I don't fear it anymore, but I don't trust it either. I keep it there as a reminder that I exist, or at least that something wearing my face does. I've started talking to it again, quietly, cautiously, not like before. This time, I ask questions. Do you remember who we were? Do you think we ever were? The reflection never answers, but sometimes, I swear, its lips move a heartbeat after mine stop. It doesn't frighten me anymore. In a way, it comforts me, like at least someone else is still here. The city outside has become quieter, or maybe I've grown deaf to it. The people I used to see every day, the joggers, the neighbors, the man who sold newspapers on the corner, they've vanished. Or maybe I just stopped noticing them. When I do go out, it feels like walking through an old film reel, flickering faces, faded sounds, everything slightly out of sync. One afternoon, while walking down an empty street, I saw someone standing in the distance. The sun was behind them, so I couldn't make out the face. They weren't moving, just standing there, head tilted slightly, as if studying me. My chest tightened. For a second, I thought it was the boy. Then I blinked, and the figure was gone. The street was empty again, the air still, but I could still feel eyes on me, calm, patient, unblinking. When I got home, the mirror was cracked again, a new fracture running diagonally across the glass, like a line drawn by an unseen hand. I didn't touch it. I just sat down and stared. Somewhere behind that broken reflection, I could see shapes, faint outlines shifting, fading in and out of view. The voice hadn't spoken in weeks, but I felt it watching, waiting. I started hearing a new sound at night, a faint hum, low and rhythmic, coming from somewhere deep inside the walls. It wasn't the old tapping anymore. This was slower, like a heartbeat. I pressed my ear to the plaster and listened. It was there, steady, deliberate, like the pulse of the building itself. I whispered, "Is that you?" But no one answered. Sleep became impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw places I'd never been. Long corridors, rooms without doors, faces turning away, just as I tried to focus. I'd wake up sweating, gasping for air, sometimes standing in the middle of the room without remembering how I got there. Once, I woke to find all my notes, the ones I'd written over the months, stacked neatly in a pile on the floor. Organized by color. I never did that. Another time, I found a message written on my wall in my handwriting, but upside down. "You are not alone." I stood there for a long time, staring at the words, trying to understand if it was meant as comfort or a warning. I tried to reach out for help once. I don't even know why. I called a number I found scribbled on the back of an old envelope. No name, just the digits. A man answered. His voice was calm, too calm. "Hello?" I said. "Yes," he replied. "We've been waiting for you." I froze. "Who is this?" "You already know," he said. "You left your name here a long time ago." Before I could speak again, the line went dead. I checked the call history. But there was nothing there. No record of the call ever happening. The number had vanished. That night, I tore through every page of my notes, looking for anything that could explain it. Somewhere near the bottom of the stack, I found a page I didn't recognize. The paper was older, yellowed at the edges, like it had been there for years. Written across it in red ink were the words, "This is where you stopped being you." I stared at that line for what felt like hours. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from recognition. I remembered writing something similar months ago when I first began keeping records. But this handwriting wasn't mine. It looked like mine, but slightly off, each letter drawn with just a little too much pressure, like the writer was forcing the pen through the page. The hum inside the walls grew louder that night. Not menacing, just constant, like breathing or waiting. I turned off every light, sat on the floor, and listened. The more I listened, the more it sounded like voices hidden beneath the noise. There weren't words, just tones, overlapping and shifting, like distant echoes of a conversation I wasn't meant to hear. Then, in a whisper softer than thought, I heard it again, my own voice, speaking from somewhere beyond the wall. "Do you remember which side you're on?" I held my breath. I didn't know how to answer, because I wasn't sure anymore if I was the one inside the room, or the one behind the wall. trying to get out. I started seeing people again, or maybe I started seeing versions of them. Every face felt familiar, yet slightly wrong, like the world had been rebuilt from memory. But whoever did it couldn't quite remember the details. One morning, I went to the grocery store near my old building. The doorbell jingled the same way it always had, but the man behind the counter wasn't the same. He looked like him, same gray beard, same tired eyes, but when I said his name, he stared blankly and said, "Sorry, I think you've mistaken me for someone else." I laughed it off, but his expression didn't change. That flat, polite smile, like he was reading from a script. When I turned to leave, I caught my reflection in the freezer glass, and for a moment, the reflection didn't move with me. It blinked half a second late. I didn't go back there again. The hum inside my walls has followed me wherever I go now. It's no longer bound to a place. It's inside me, like an echo that never fades. Sometimes I feel it vibrating in my bones, quiet reminder that something unseen is still watching, still recording. I've tried to track the sound. I've mapped it, every pulse, every rise and fall. There's a pattern, a rhythm. If I listen long enough, it forms something close to words, though I can never catch them all. I think it's saying my name over and over, but distorted, drawn out like static. And then, 3 nights ago, I received a letter. It was slipped under my door. No return address. The paper was thick, old-fashioned, the ink still damp. Inside, there was only one sentence: "Stop rewriting what you don't understand." I froze, rewriting. I looked around my apartment. The notes, the recordings, the diary entries I'd been keeping to make sense of everything. I pulled one of the notebooks open, the earliest one, and started reading. Only, the words were different. Entire paragraphs had changed. Sentences I never wrote now filled the pages, describing moments I didn't remember living. It said I had spoken to people I never met, confessed things I never did. My own handwriting, perfect, unbroken, but it wasn't mine. That's when I began to notice the pages kept rewriting themselves. If I left one open and turned away for even a moment, the text would shift. Tiny letters moving like insects on the page, rearranging, reforming. I tried to film it to prove it, but on the video, nothing happened. The pages were blank. I tore them all up, burned some. But the next morning, new pages appeared under my door, filled with words I hadn't written yet. They told me what I would do that day, where I would go, what I would see, what I would remember. And they were always right. The last page I found said, "You will meet her again. Don't forget this time." Kay didn't understand who her was, but the moment I read it, a scent hit me, jasmine, faint and distant, and a memory couldn't place began clawing its way up from somewhere deep in my chest. A face, a voice saying, "You promised you'd come back," a hand reaching through the dark. That night, I dreamed of the old house, the one I grew up in. The windows were boarded, the rooms empty. I walked through them slowly, touching the walls, feeling every crack, every dent. And then I saw her. She was sitting in the corner of the room, knees drawn to her chest, staring at the floor. I couldn't see her face. I whispered, "Who are you?" She looked up, and it was me, not as I am now, but as I was before everything. The younger me smiled, but her eyes were hollow. "You took my place," she said. "You don't get to leave." I woke up with blood on my hands. Not much, just a thin line across my palm, like I'd been holding broken glass in my sleep. I went to the mirror. There were 2 reflections now, both mine, both breathing. One of them smiled. I ran, out the door, down the stairwell, into the street. The city was empty again, silent except for that hum, louder now, all around me. Streetlights flickered like they were blinking in code. Every window I passed reflected me, but each one a little differently, a little more wrong. And then I saw her, across the street, the same woman from the dream, my face, but not mine. She was standing under a flickering light, watching me. The hum stopped. The air went perfectly still. I whispered, "Who are you?" She smiled faintly and said, "I'm the part you forgot." Then she turned and walked away. I followed. I don't remember for how long. Hours, maybe days. Streets melted into corridors. Corridors into hallways that shouldn't exist. At some point, I realized we weren't outside anymore. We were inside something, a building that stretched forever. Walls pulsing softly like they were alive. She stopped in front of a door, the same one from my first nightmare. She looked back and said, "You can open it now." My hand trembled on the doorknob behind that door. I could hear the hum again, deeper, slower, like a heart beating under the floor. And then I opened it. The door opened with a slow, heavy sigh, not like wood creaking, but like something alive, exhaling after holding its breath for too long. The air that spilled out was cold and dry, filled with the faint scent of old paper and dust. Inside, there was only darkness, but not the kind you see at night. This darkness felt thick, physical, like it could swallow sound. I stepped in. The door closed behind me on its own. For a moment, I thought I was blind. Then, slowly, a faint glow began to form in the distance, a pulsing light, steady as a heartbeat. I walked toward it. The sound of my footsteps didn't echo. It was as if the room was swallowing them whole. The glow led me to a chair, and in that chair sat me. Not a reflection, not an illusion. It was me sitting there, head tilted slightly, eyes half closed, as if I had been waiting for myself to arrive. I froze. The figure lifted his head and smiled. "You took longer than I expected," he said. My voice, but deeper, calmer. I couldn't speak. My throat felt tight. "What? What is this?" He leaned forward. The dim light revealed details. The scar on his palm, the same as mine. The faint lines under his eyes, identical. Every part of him was me, except one thing, his expression. He looked peaceful. "This is where you come when you stop pretending," he said. "When you stop rewriting your life to make it make sense." I shook my head. "I don't understand." "You do," he said softly. "You've always known. You just didn't want to look." He pointed behind me. I turned, and there it was. A wall covered entirely in pages. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands, pinned and layered over one another. Every note I had ever written, every word, every line, there. But they weren't just words anymore. They were moving. The letters swam slowly across the pages, forming and reforming, shifting like they were alive. And between those words, I could see faces flickering in and out of focus. People I remembered. People, IDN, single quotes. The boy, the woman, the man on the phone, whispering the same phrase over and over, like a chant. Finish the story. My other self stood up and walked toward the wall. He pressed his hand against one of the pages, and the words rippled outward like water. "Do you see?" he said. "You've made all of this. Every choice, every lie, every memory you refused to face. It all had to go somewhere. So it came here." I backed away. "No, I didn't." He cut me off. "You did. You turned your guilt into ghosts. You turned your loneliness into walls. You built this place out of everything you didn't want to remember." The hum began again, louder than before, deep, rhythmic, vibrating through the floor. The walls started to tremble, and the faces behind the pages began to scream silently, mouths wide but soundless. My other self stepped closer until we were face to face. "Do you remember what you did the night everything changed?" he whispered. I didn't. "Yes, you did. You wanted to forget, so you did. You wanted to be someone else, so you built me." I stared at him. "Then who are you?" He smiled faintly. "The one who stayed behind." The floor beneath us cracked open. Light spilled out, not blinding, but warm. It felt familiar, like morning sunlight through an old window. I could hear faint laughter somewhere below, echoes of another life. One that used to be mine. He reached out a hand. You can stay here, or you can wake up. But if you wake up, you'll remember everything. I hesitated. My hand trembled in the air. What happens if I stay? I asked. He looked around at the walls, the shifting words, the screaming faces. Then you become me, and I keep writing. I could feel my chest tightening. The hum was deafening now. The air vibrated, and the light began to pull at me like a current. He tilted his head. It's your choice. But hurry. The story doesn't wait. For a moment, I saw everything. All at once, the nights I couldn't sleep. The voices that weren't there. The faces that changed. Every time I blinked, and somewhere in all of it, truth. I reached out. My hand touched his, and everything went silent. Final light. Pure white light. When I opened my eyes, I was lying in a hospital bed. The steady beeping of a monitor filled the silence. For a moment, everything felt still, too still. The air was clean, the walls white, and the hum that had haunted me for months was gone. A nurse walked in. She smiled softly. "You're awake," she said. Her voice was kind, too kind. I tried to sit up, but my arms felt heavy. Tubes ran into my veins, and the taste of metal filled my mouth. "How long?" I whispered. "How long have I been here?" She looked uncertain. "You've been unconscious for a few weeks. There was an accident. You fell. Hit your head. An accident." The words echoed like a foreign language. I tried to remember the fall, but all I could see were flashes. A door, a wall covered in words. My own hand reaching out. The nurse adjusted something on the monitor. "You're safe now. Just rest." I closed my eyes, but rest wouldn't come, because behind my eyelids, I could still see him, the other me, standing behind that wall of words, watching. He didn't move. He just stared. The doctor came in later, a tall man with a soft voice and unreadable eyes. He asked me questions. My name, the year, the president. I answered them all, perfectly. He smiled, but there was something strange about it. When he left, I heard him whisper to the nurse outside. He's still mixing timelines. Don't tell him about the recordings yet. Recordings. That night, when everyone was gone, I pulled the IV out and got up. My legs trembled, but I forced myself to move. The hospital corridor was silent. The lights dimmed to a pale yellow. I followed the signs, not toward exit, but toward records. I don't know why. It just felt right. Inside the records room, everything smelled of dust and alcohol. I opened a drawer labeled with my name. Inside were dozens of files, all mine, but there were also tapes, each one marked with a date. I picked the latest one, slid it into a player, and pressed play, static. Then my own voice, day 141. If you're hearing this, you're not the original anymore. You're the copy. Don't panic. Just keep reading. My heart froze. The tape continued. You built this loop to survive. Every time you reached the truth, you rewrote it, created a new version of yourself, cleaner, emptier. You thought if you forgot enough, the pain would fade. But you can't erase what you are. You can only start over. The static rose again, and then silence. I stood there, breathing hard. My fingers trembled. I looked down at the folder again. There were old photos inside me. Years younger, smiling beside people I didn't recognize. But in every photo, my eyes looked wrong, like I wasn't really there. And in the last picture, there were two of me. One standing, one sitting in the same hospital bed. My throat tightened. I turned toward the door, but someone was standing there. It was the nurse only. She wasn't smiling anymore. Her eyes were empty. "Did you find what you were looking for?" she asked. I backed away. "What is this place?" She tilted her head, almost sympathetically. "You tell us. You've built it." The lights flickered. The walls rippled like water. The hum returned, faint at first, then louder, vibrating through the floor. Through my chest, the room began to twist, folding in on itself like paper. I stumbled back, clutching the tape. No, this is real. Her voice echoed from everywhere and nowhere. Real is just what you keep remembering. I dropped the tape. It shattered. The hum became a roar. The walls fell away, and I was back in the chair, the same dark room, the same light, the same him sitting across from me. He smiled, calm, patient, infinite. See, he said softly. You woke up, just not where you thought. I looked down. The pages were back endless, shimmering, whispering my thoughts before I could think them. He handed me a pen. Go on, he said. It's your turn to keep the story alive. I took it. My hand moved on its own. The first line appeared across the blank paper. I woke up in a hospital room. He smiled wider. Perfect. The hum slowed. Steady. Rhythmic. The sound of my heartbeat syncing with something larger. I looked up one last time and asked, how many times have I done this? He leaned close and whispered, enough to forget why you started. The lights dimmed. The pages turned themselves, and I kept writing.